How's it going, everyone? K-Jewelers here, and oh my god, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is finally here, and just from the reveal, it looks absolutely incredible. Like I'm sure a lot of people were, I was surrounded by a haze of hype in the moment that made it kind of difficult to pick up on a lot of the finer details and potential plot threads, which are tucked away within the trailer. So, I figured it'd be worth taking a deep analytical dive into the various shots and scenes on display in this first look in order to understand what Xenoblade Chronicles 3 might be like. Just as a heads up, there will be hype train size spoilers for Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2, so I'd recommend clicking off if you want to avoid those. I have not said that in a very long time, but additionally, there are going to be details I will miss since this trailer is jam-packed. So let me know in the comments if you noticed anything else on display in here. Furthermore, if you end up enjoying this video and would like to see more Xenoblade content while the hype train continues, consider subscribing to the channel. We are extremely close to hitting 10k, and I think it'd be pretty rad if we could hit that massive milestone soon. Anyways, let's get to it. The trailer opens on one of our new protagonists, Noah, a soldier from a new nation known as Keves, playing a melody on the flute. According to Takahashi himself, the flute is actually one of the key themes in this game. Visually, this shot doesn't seem to reveal much, but he does have this strange gray circular object with a blue ring light on his belt, which looks very similar to the one that Shulk has on his future connected outfit. It's a very small detail that builds towards the larger narrative that the nation of Keves is tied to the world of the Bionis and Mechonis, and likely got a lot of its tech from Shulk's ideas. More on that later. The next segment showcases a lineup of soldiers running into combat with glowing weapons, such as greatswords, longswords, and rifles. The blue tints seem to resemble blade weapons or even the Monado replicas and Melia's World Ender from Future Connected. However, since we know that the Kefesan army's description on the website talks about the development of mechanical technology, and that their potential leader may be a prominent Xenoblade Chronicles 1 character, it's likely they're connected to the replicas and World Eater more than the blade weapons. The soldier's armor is very Homs-esque, and the scene itself practically parallels the Battle of Sword Valley from the introduction of Xenoblade Chronicles 1. Continuing on, the scene and shot composition cleverly pan up to a massive robot sporting Mechon-like parts and a face extremely reminiscent of Metal Faces with the silver coloring, the small and large red circle positions in each eye socket, and the spikes on the side of its head that remind me greatly of those on Yaldabaoth, Egil's face Mechon. If this is piloted by a soldier like the website says, then I guess you could say this is really a faced Mechon. While this behemoth is on screen, the voice notes that the world is named Aionios, a Greek word that can translate to everlasting, or without beginning or end, and certainly makes sense given that the world is said to be in constant conflict. I believe this voice belongs to Noah, and yet again, we have a very familiar callback to the opening of Xenoblade Chronicles, where our main character Shulk gives a brief overview of the world during a battle in a very identical setting. This could just be a cute reference, but considering Noah is kinda giving me Shulk vibes, I'm just gonna go ahead and toss that into my Noah is related to Shulk bucket over there. It's a work in progress. The battlefield leads to a more personal encounter between a number of characters, starting off with Noah flipping into view with a familiar looking sword. Although it doesn't share the exact same design, this blade certainly resembles, and very well might be, this game's Monado. Noah was actually dodging a twin ring tossed by another protagonist, Mio, a Gormati with my favorite design of the cast. I really love this so much. It also borrows a design element from Blade Nia in the ribbons and Mithra with the pleats on her skirt. Most noteworthy is her Flesh Eater core crystal. Although it's unsure how this plays into her character, the general thought is that she is Nia's daughter. And while I'm kind of into this idea, there's one issue, and it's that Xenoblade Chronicles 2 never explicitly states whether blades are capable of reproduction or not. There is mention of blades and drivers getting married, but not any concerning offspring. Due to this, I also have the working theory that Mio might be some sort of clone of Nia. I'm not entirely sure how this would come to be, but I believe it would lead to an interesting dynamic between Mio and Nia, given that they seem to be on other sides, at least later in the game. Or perhaps that's just the Metal Gear fan in me wanting that.
Brothers!
Anyways, Mio is a soldier for Agnos, the other nation that centers itself on ether technology, which is fitting given that blade weapons require ether. As for the two nations of Keves and Agnos, they actually translate to lamb in Hebrew and Latin respectively. Now, from my limited 10 hours into Xenogears knowledge, there are two factions at war. Kislev, and Ave, which conveniently share the same first letters as the Xenoblade Chronicles free nations. As I alluded to earlier, a lot of Keves is going to align with the world of the Bionis and Mechonis, and plenty of Agnos will exhibit characteristics of Alrest. Soon after these two characters start fighting, two more characters enter the fray in Senna, an ally of Mio who wields a big-ass hammer, which looks like a shield hammer and would make a lot of sense as she has a core crystal on her chest. Her hair also has a faint wispy blue to its tips, which is reminiscent of Brigid, so potentially there's room for discussion to conclude she might be related to her. Finally, she has some writing below her collar. I want to give a shout out to Luxin for pointing out this possibility, but the language kinda looks like Alrestian. The first character here looks strikingly similar to the character used for 8. However, it's harder to pin down what the others are. The other individual in this fight is Lons, Noah's partner with a sword, shield, thing? Whatever it is, it make Cloud jealous, and he protects Noah from a strike against Senna. Something you'll notice is that these characters look to have hybrid weapons. Lons has his sword shield, and another character down the line seems to have a hybrid between a staff and a rifle. Lons feels like the Rhine to Noah's Shulk, protecting him from his opponent in the Arachno Queen while surrounded by the effects of Monato's shield. Although the hexagon pattern is found when Monato's shield is in use, their smaller size is closer to the barriers created by blades to block incoming attacks, which is intriguing because Keves typically embodies more Xenoblade Chronicles 1 traits. Furthermore, Lons has an interesting design. I actually do like it, but I've been hearing people call him Indalese. If we're gonna go off the assumption that Keves is Xenoblade Chronicles 1 related, it would make far more sense for him to be Machina, or at least some offshoot of it. Not to mention that the lines and coloring on his face as well as the reddish eyes are traits of the Machina, seen on characters like Egil and Vinea. Okay, but let's address the elephant in the room. Why does this guy have Adam's hair? Well, some Machina have hair. It blends in, but Vinea has silver hair, and if you recall the Machina children, they have a very similar lighter tuft of hair, so it makes sense why he could be a member of this race. And that would be really awesome because that would make for the first playable Machina. I don't necessarily think that every new character in this cast needs to be related to a previously established one. I actually think that might take away from some of the agency of some of these new characters, but if Noah did happen to be a descendant of Shulk, and Lons was perhaps connected to Vinea, Egil's sister, then I think that would make for such a sick dynamic that builds off of Shulk and Egil's understanding in such a beautiful and poetic way. Hey there everybody, this is K Jewelers, and normally whenever I make an edit to the video, I try to splice it in organically, but at this point I've made so many updates that I'm about to lose my mind, and while I have not watched other people's video analyses of the trailer as to not influence my thoughts, I have seen posts on the twitter.com from not only other content creators, but Nintendo's official account. Such as this update that just happened that says that Lons is apparently 18 years old. Now, this might not seem shocking to some of you, but to give you some data on this whole debacle, this man is over 1,000 and this man is over 6,000. Which means that due to age scaling, there is no way that a full-blooded Machina should look like a grown-ass adult at the age of 18. And I think somebody's might have stirred up the Machina gene pool, if you get what I'm saying. Alright, who hot? Was it you two? I don't know. The hand of the shoulder maneuver. That's a bit of a bold strategy right there. You think somebody who's just a friend would do that? Oi, somebody get the teacher chaperone. Oi, you two, you gotta make room for the Holy Spirit. I'm losing my mind. Next up is the shot that got the biggest reaction out of me. The unmasking of a character that looks shockingly similar to Vandam. If you recall in Xenoblade Chronicles 2, Vandam got... yeah, but this could still be Vandam, technically. See, each Xenoblade game has a Vandam. He's the Grump Colonel Vanguard, or Vandam in Japanese, in Xenoblade Chronicles 1, the buff commander in Xenoblade X, and the leader of the mercenary unit in Xenoblade 2. Hell, this naming trend goes back to Xenogears and Xenosaga with the name Vanderkam, who had purple crosses on their face instead of the scar we see here. This could be Vandam, but just a descendant of his since he looks really similar to the Xenoblade Chronicles 2 one, yet with a different skin tone, facial hair, and a badass eye patch. His voice actor Simon Forbes seems to have returned to voice him too, which is why I don't really think that this is a older Rex or an older Zeke like some people are saying. Following this surprise is a series of shots of people playing flutes, and despite the fact that Mio and Noah were fighting a few shots ago, they seem to be aligned with each other, likely due to what the official website says, which is their roles as Offseers, people who mourn for soldiers who have met their end on the field of battle. These shots also follow our Vandom-like fellow, clarifying that they are not enemies, so their relationship is likely something that develops over the narrative. I could see the story having them combat each other very early on, and then a majority of the game's duration concerning itself with these two ambassadors of their nations trying to unite them. There are also these peculiar translucent cubes that are floating in the air around these characters in some of the scenes when they are playing the flute. Yellow particles can be seen at this moment, while blue ones are present in the very beginning. Since we know that the flute is significant to the narrative and these seem to be a byproduct of the instrument, I think it's fair to wager a guess these might be the floating particles attached to this game's logo. For Xenoblade Chronicles 2, there were flames meant to represent Pyra, who is our leading blade, so there is a precedent established in the series' logos. Why different colors though? If we look at the flutes, there are two variants, a primarily black colored one and a white one. It seems like the black one is for Keves and the white one for Agnos, which is supported by the ornaments on their ends. The white one has the exact same kind of ribbon that's found on Mio's design. And here's a shot where Mio and Noah seem to have traded flutes, which is a neat bit indicating some development. Yet, the flute color isn't always consistent with the particle color, so we can rule out that option. But it still could have to do with the different nations. Around Noah, presuming it's early, the blue color of the particles are the same color as those tied to Keves. The yellow is pretty close to the ether weapons of Agnes, and we know that ether has taken the form of particles in previous games. So, call me crazy, but perhaps these characters, as Offseers who mourn the dead, their job is to convert those deceased into ether energy for their respective nation. The only flaw in this theory is that this lineup of Kevessans are converting yellow particles when you'd expect it to be blue. But you know what is the most absurd thing about this? Two lines that seem to be delivered by Nia and perhaps Rex.
Fine for you, isn't it? All that time you've got.
You could try to move forwards again.
How can our life?
I say perhaps because apparently this voice is Noah in the Japanese trailer, but it also sounds so similar to Rex in the English one. I double-checked the main story script for Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and they seem to be entirely unique, which further supports a certain character later being Nia, and, if it is Rex, a brief cameo by him in some capacity. I also just like Rex saying, try to move forward again, since it seems to imply that Nia is dealing with personal struggles after she came to accept her past and identity as a flesh eater. Additionally, it calls to mind one of my favorite lines in the entirety of Xenoblade 2 that is delivered by Rex.
We need to find a way forward within that world. Even you used to think like that. What?
Returning to the dark battlefield from earlier, we are greeted with our final two protagonists, the High Entian Uni, who teams up with Noah and Lons, as well as Taion, who fights with Mio and Sina. Uni seems to not be a pure-blooded High Entia, as supported by her shorter wings, carries that crazy staff sniper hybrid I was talking about earlier, and has some characters inscribed on her top just like Sina. I honestly love her design, and the abundance of these short jackets across the main cast really does wonders for them. Taion, on the other hand, just go ahead and get the Joker and Akos jokes out of the way while you can. As for me, I'm going to refer to him as the Origami Killer from now on, because he attacks people with these ludicrous paper-looking birds. Although it's rather bizarre, I kinda like them, and it offers an interesting shake-up to the gameplay styles we're accustomed to. His design includes this long orange scarf, which seems to continue Saito's addition of items that blow in the wind at the request of Xenoblade Chronicles 2's development team. While their designs are cool and all, there's a particular line that haunts me more than any other in this trailer. Taion yells back at Uni,
They're not your friends anymore. They're his fuel.
"They're his fuel." To me personally, that sounds astoundingly similar to the dichotomy that existed between Zanza and the Homs. Zanza himself stated that the Homs were nothing more than food clinging to his body, and Alphys mentions that the cycle of Bionis' life returning from whence it came was a way to perpetuate his existence. Now, is this guaranteed to be Xanta or Klaus related? What the hell does this even mean? I have absolutely no idea. But perhaps the converted energy of the Offseers has something to do with it, like they are charging some dude's crazy weapon or a new godly entity. But this is the quote that has me the most excited to see how this plays out in the story. This line is also delivered in the present tense, which likely means that it is not referencing Xanta's actions in Xenoblade Chronicles 1. Finally, we have arrived at the classic Xenoblade trailer walking montage, where we get to preview some of the beautiful vistas on display. I'd like to note that a lot of these locations seem to blend elements from various worlds in Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2. An example being the location at the 1 minute mark, which looks like more Ardane's capital Alba Cavanish and the architecture on display on the Mechonis having merged into one. If it's not Alba Cavanish, another idea that popped into my head was that it could be a new colony, since the end of Xenoblade Chronicles 1 saw the restoration process with the help of Machina technology. The uneven stone walls are also more reminiscent of Colony 9 than more Ardane's steel capital. Some of these locations in particular seem to use exact parts from the location of each game. For instance, this walkway present at 54 seconds looks to be taken directly from the distant fingertips secret area on the Fallen Arm, albeit with some visual cleanup. As a result, I'll be pointing out visual landmarks or resources that seem to originate from previous areas in the series. There's also the title Sword March, given by what I'm calling New Vandom, but it's hard to say what exactly Sword March encompasses, since we know that the name of the entire world is Ionios. Regardless, the first location is our grassy plains area, ordained with the large waterfalls and hills we've come to adore, as well as a rainbow. And as we are all familiar with, you can't have a rainbow without Rhine, baby. Rhine confirmed for Xenoblade Chronicles 3, let's go! In the back left, we can see one of the giant overlooking cliffs found on Gar Plain. Flipping back to the metallic walkway at 54 seconds, there's a lot to take apart with this shot. First, there are like 3 to 5 bloody biomes on display here. In the far distance, there is a lush green plateau that bears a resemblance to Gormont, but at its base is a field with a lighter green, very much like Gar Plains. Over on the left, there are some yellowish patches of grass accompanied by what looks like sand, which would put it close to Dana Desert from Torna. Yes, I spent a lot of time staring at the different kinds of grass, but don't you worry, I did manage to touch some grass on my own during the process. Closest to the camera is a rocky canyon region, which could be like Sword Valley, but it lacks some of those mechanical parts you see built into the cliffside, at least from this view. And I think it might be attached to an area we'll see later, which also lacks those components. And if we want to get really crazy, there's a mountain range in the back that looks like Valak Mountain. All of these locations in view mask the opposing head of Uriah resting in the back left corner, which can be seen on the title reveal screen. Although I don't think we can 100% say these are the exact areas from the previous entries, in the event that they are all returning and interconnected, we could assume that the layouts will be drastically different and we're not just going to be revisiting the exact same layouts. After that scenery, we get a breathtaking view of the Mechonis sword plunged into the ground just past the horizon, and vegetation is covering a decent amount of it. It's a cute detail that helps sell the large span of time that has occurred between the events of the previous game and now. How long is that time span? We're not entirely sure, but I would wager close to or over 100 years. Why this time range? Well, spoilers for later in the trailer, but there's a character that we can presume is Melia. If that's the case, and although she is masked, she really doesn't look that old. Melia in base Xenoblade Chronicles is 88 years old, but looks no older than her early 20s. Saurian, who looks to be in his 60s or 70s, is 320 years old. 100 to 150 years after Future Connected would put Melia around 190 to 240 years old, and that age could realistically fit her look better than, say, 200 to 300 years. However, considering the whole main cast is 18 to 19 years old, which is very weird even for a half-blooded Hyentian in this 100 to 150 year window, there might be some time shenanigans happening. After earning my totally legit degree in agrostology, I can confirm that this landscape looks more similar to the shades present in Dana Desert, but aside from the great shot of the sword, not much here. The next locale seems to be that canyon area we saw from above earlier, with the central focus being the fingers and palm hole of the Fallen Arm. The orange hue of the trees also gives me vibes to the foliage found on Torna, as well as the glow found on the Titan's wings and tail when its true form awakens. Even though these were present in previous shots, this clip gives us the best look at collectibles in this game, and their new purple look. It's hard to say whether they are handled as they are in Xenoblade 1, where it's a touch and go and you receive one item, or Xenoblade 2's collection points where you stop to potentially do a test for better pulls. I'd like a mixture of the two, since I like the preservation of momentum from Xenoblade 1 with the higher payout from Xenoblade 2. Here's a good glimpse at the large mechon-like machine from the battle at the beginning of the trailer, and it is enormous. Like, it looks bigger than the M104 fortress units you see on Sword Valley. Below it appears to be a base camp of some sorts, in addition to a Nemus camel, or some member of the family. There's a stunning yet brief segment showcasing a water-filled location with a palm tree next to the waterfall at the top of the cliff, just like Magna Falls. Here are a couple Flami minding their own business, but it's a lot harder to narrow down an exact species since a lot of them are blue. Admittedly, I have no idea what this ship could possibly be, but it is tied to Agnes since we see it in one of the screenshots on the website. Taion finds himself in this Satoral Marsh-esque environment given the surrounding fog, high cliff walls, and the multiple ether lamps lining the path. If you look at the glowing half circle on the entity in front of Taion, it's actually the same design found on Noah's blade, but greenish yellow instead of blue. It's not exclusive to him though, as it's present in a bunch of places, and even just more soldiers across both factions. If anything, this color tells us it belongs to Agnes. Alright, we've seen some familiar, yet unique looking stuff. Show me something entirely new. We Sonic Adventure 2 now, baby! Yes, grind rails are a thing, and the first of 2 new movement options on display in this trailer, potentially free. Personally, I love this. Areas look like they can be more sizable, and traversal will be given a highly welcomed injection of freshness in a way that X was able to capture better than its contemporaries. At 1 minute and 3 seconds, our party is running through a Magna Forest-like environment and a brown quadwing is flying in the background. And that's interesting since jungle quadwings, which are found in Magna Forest, are indeed brown. Again, not a guarantee that any of these locations or creatures are exactly like their previous counterparts, especially since some of the color variants don't match with how they appear in later areas, so it could just be a funny coincidence. Most notably, however, is that the party has 4 members on screen at once: Noah, Mio, Lons, and Senna. For Xenoblade Chronicles 2, this isn't unusual since you can have up to 6 characters moving around at once. This very well could allude to a potential blade system, but it gets tricky to say for sure. Mio as a flesh eater could go either way since Nia's blade form was attached to Rex, but then you have Jin playing by his own rules in some stuff like the Titan Battleship Assault. There's also the fact that Senna is a blade, or that Xenoblade Chronicles X just has 4 party members out at once, and any surface level prediction I could make seems more predisposed to be wrong since we possess absolutely no knowledge on how the battle system works, so I'd rather not get too caught up into it now. This Letherian archipelago looking area is inhabited by some Taos, and what I believe is a completely new monster, and it looks metal as hell, and I'm all for it. Both this and the Legend of the Hidden Temple Blue Barracuda are excellent and intimidating designs. He's even got a little dude riding on his back like a Hode would do. In the background are some high Entian-like spires and a strange purple glow in front of or on the rocky wall. My first assumption was an ether deposit, which would imply the return of gems as a gameplay mechanic. However, I can't say that for certain. There's also not any purple gems in Xenoblade Chronicles 1. But you know what is purple and attached to weapons are the Oroboros symbols on the party's weapons. I'll dive more into this later, but potentially these deposits could serve as the replacements for ether deposits for the party to upgrade their equipment. What might support a more gaseous nature to this purple hue is its presence in the grind wire shot where the same coloration is floating in the air above the island alongside this black smoke. We'll talk about that smoke in just a moment, but that doesn't change the fact that these gases could be interacted with. This single shot that lasts about a second has so much stuff going on in it because there's that ominous black wispy cloud on the water's surface I just mentioned. I believe this might be directly related to the Fog King in some capacity. The nebulous appearance of the smoke looks similar to those composing the Fog King's body. Considering Takahashi called Future Connected a stepping stone for the future, and the Fog King was a prominent part of that narrative, it makes sense that it would come back here. Potentially, it could be some remnant of malice that needs to be cleaned up with something like a field skill. Granted, that would mean field skills are back and... oh god, please no. That or the smoke might mark a region where enemies might be possessed by the Fog King, just like that Taos in Future Connected. Last but not least here, Mio does an elegant dolphin dive out of the water, which I believe could be two potential things. Possibility A is some form of diving ability. I don't necessarily think you're going to find Morpha at the bottom of this Air of Sea-like body of water, but perhaps you can use it to avoid detection from the new slew of water-based enemies. Now the reason I believe this is because the camera actually moves down for a couple frames at the very end when she's diving underneath the water. However, the camera doesn't move up at all when she makes her initial jump. Possibility B is the ability to jump out of the water. This would be a small yet incredibly welcome change since it can kind of be annoying to swim alongside an outcrop of land just to find a shoreline. This would make it so that you could potentially cut out the middleman. Plus, it could be another movement option in a way. Speaking of movement options, boats! Yes, just like Xenoblade Chronicles X, it appears that you will have vehicles that travel across the larger bodies of water in the world to some extent. Even if X isn't directly tied into it, I like how they are borrowing aspects of its design with regards to exploration, since I think that game offers the best of that within the series. Although the ship might look close to that of the Junks, it's mainly the door opening to the backside that mimics this ship, so it's probably a completely new thing. If you look in the distance on the left side of the landmass, you can actually see those high Entian pillars from the last sequence, more faint black wisp, and here's a cool sea serpent that is entirely separate from the last sea creature. That landmass, by the way, echoes the imagery of one of the Leferian archipelago islands. This might be pure coincidence since the main figures behind Kevis are likely not familiar with the symbol, but this large machine from earlier has a conduit-shaped design on its underside. At 1 minute and 15 seconds, we see Nopon with human-like hair. Funnily enough, it reminds me of Rex and Beta Pyra, but I highly doubt that's what they were going for. 1 minute and 16 seconds shows another shot of Uni, and it's weird because the wings on her head are black, but in some previous shots and in her official art, they're white. It could certainly be attributed to lighting, but this kind of looks intentional to me. We also hear mention of clocks twice from Uni and Mio. Specifically,
what good's filling up these flickering clocks in our eyes? It'll never replace the friends we've lost.
The flame clock! It has to go!
The only imagery in this trailer that jumps out to me as clock-like are the lights filling the circumference of the circles we see on Noah's Sword and other machines. While most appear to be half full, not all of them are, like the one in this large machine's mouth is only a fourth of the way filled. Perhaps the ceaseless combat that drives the world of Ionios that Noah mentions is a way of filling up these clocks, and by extension charging the weapons. But at last, we have reached the big hitter of the trailer, Dark Empress Melia and Shadow Queen Nia, who seem to represent Kevis and Agnes respectively, and are at war with one another. The two of them deliver voice lines, and the second one is very clearly Katrin Mayhew as Nia.
They must be erased without a trace.
Each character is also wearing a mask, with Melia's looking like the one she used to hide her appearance from the people before she was accepted as the Empress, or something like the Bionite Order's mask. Melia states that Oroboros, the name for an ancient serpent of legend that eats its own tail, abhorred this world. You can actually see this design incorporated into some of the characters' weapons, such as the purple gem on Senna's hammer, Mio's twin blades, Lanza's shield, Tyon's gauntlet, and Uni's staff. So, Oroboros is not limited to a single nation, but the party members from both sides, so this could be the banner that the main party flies under, and Melia is noting how their ideals don't align with hers. Or it could be a third organization the party has joined. I actually noticed that the Oroboros symbol completely replaces the blue and green circles found on the weapons, so that supports the idea that this encounter between them all is likely very early in the story, and certainly raises some questions about their significance in the narrative. The reason for their war isn't explicitly clear, but there have been a lot of theories going around. The primary one I've heard is that the two are fighting over their beliefs on the world based on their experience with the respective side of Klaus. Those from Kevis would know him as a crazed god that saw his creations as nothing more than food, while those of Agnes recognize Klaus as a deity who gave the people a chance at a future beyond the expiring titans. Given that blades are life forms rooted in a perpetual cycle of destruction and rebirth, the very thing Zanza stood for, it would make sense why they would adopt the name Oroboros and why Kevas would oppose the fundamental principle Blades and Agnes are built on. All things considered, this is merely a theory and a full-on discussion is best suited for another time. Otherwise, we'd be here forever. There's an armored figure walking away from Melia who looks pretty cool, but I swear if it's Galgar returning and this is the second time I unknowingly complimented his design in a trailer, I'm gonna lose it.
Whoa, what are you?
The concluding sequence is the grand reveal of our logo, with Mio and Noah playing the flute before looking over the horizon at what remains of the Mechonis' sword and the Titan Uriah. Those particles are floating in the air once again alongside their performance too. Cue the game's logo and the end of our long wait. Inside the number 3, we see this strange pattern composed of 5 diamonds with 2 parallel lines running through the outside ones. If you examine the 2 in Xenoblade 2's logo, you will see another symbol, which is the cross that appears on Pyra's clothes. So it would logically make sense to look for this new symbol on one of the characters in Free, and it's there! On Lanza's chin is the same symbol. But what if it wasn't just one character, and instead, multiple? From what I've seen, this symbol is present on 5 characters. Lans on his chin, Noah on his right hand, Unia on the right side of her chest, Sina on her left arm, and on the left hand of this blonde flute player. Just like the Oroboros symbol, this sigil is not restricted to either side, and not even the main party from what we can tell. It's hard to see some of them clearly, but the blonde girl has this symbol that varies from the bunch. Instead of only the middle diamond being red, the far left one is too, in addition to the 2 parallel lines. Perhaps the symbol itself permits some use of technology, or the position of the red diamond marks what your role or faction is in the society. This is one of those things at the top of the list for me to dive into more and look for in other trailers to get some answers. Last but not least, if you squint your eyes and look really carefully, you might be able to make out that the release date is September of this year. Although that's 7 months away, which might feel like an insurmountable trial given how excited plenty of others and myself are, it also feels extremely close given how usual it is for games to be announced years in advance. But that takes care of my initial analysis of the Xenoblade Chronicles free reveal, and good lord, I wasn't expecting that length. As I mentioned earlier, there are probably several other things that I did not notice, as well as some theories and ideas that I really didn't dive into here. Potentially that could be some subject for some future videos. Hopefully you enjoyed my breakdown of the trailer and noticed or found something that you hadn't seen before. If there's something I didn't mention or you have some theories, then leave them down in the comments. I read all my comments, but I especially want to check these out because this speculation period is really fun. If you're just getting into the series, I'm a bit confused why you're here, but welcome! I have plenty of other videos on the series ranging from discussions to kinda just some shenanigans if you want to get caught up before the 3rd entry. Regarding some non-Xenoblade content, I'm actually looking to doing one of those soon since it's kind of been several months since I've done a non-Xenoblade video, so look forward to that. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time.